All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future-focused weekly update where I am hopefully doing my job, keeping you grounded at the intersection of business, technology, and human experience. I'm looking forward to this. Thanks, everybody who watches, listens, the messages I get here and there from folks. I always appreciate it. Please send along your feedback if there's things I can do better, all that good stuff. Let me know if you find value in it. Share it with a friend, like, comment, rate, whatever, all that social stuff you're supposed to do that I'm supposed to ask you as a CTA at the beginning of these things. I do it because I really want to help and I want to do everything I can to hopefully help you. So hopefully I'm doing that well. All right, so let me run down how I'm going to do this. If you're new to my stuff, bear with me because I'm going to set some expectations. If you're familiar, this will not be new, but I just want to set some expectations on this because I've structured this one in a particular way. I've got two technical topics that I'm sandwiching in two probably, how do I say, charged topics that might make you bristle a little bit. So please bear with me. If you are new, hopefully you know my goal is not to create hype or get people all up in arms about things, but truly to try and bring a balanced perspective that sees things from just a different angle than you're often going to hear from other things. So if when I start talking about the two more charged topics, you feel the hair on the back of your neck standing up, take a deep breath and hear me all the way through before you just shut this down and say, Christopher, I can't listen to this. And you know what? If it's too intense for you at this point, well, that's okay too. Like you can turn it off and maybe come back when your emotions have calmed down a little bit. But I promise my goal is not to pit anybody against anybody. I really, truly am trying to bring unity out of some of these really, really difficult things. And I see people on all sides really struggling with things. So like I said, I'm putting them on the outside. So if you just want to get to the technical stuff, you can jump to the center. And that's why I give you the show notes. I'm going to go deeper into Microsoft's quantum chip and talk a little bit about the Majorana particle and why Microsoft is so different. I talked last week a little bit about why I was surprised at Microsoft's jump and then spent the week doing some deep research into what it is and learning more about it. It's pretty fascinating. Won't be super technical. So if you're not a total tech geek, hopefully, I think you'll find it's the right balance. And then I'm going to talk about the AI Black Swan event that is an interesting proposal that I'll talk more about. But on the outside, all right, it's going to sound like I'm talking politics. I'm not. But so let's start with the first one. So take a deep breath. Here we go. All right. I want to talk about the Trump-Zelensky Oval Office fiasco because I saw my newsfeed blow up about it. I got a number of text messages and DMs from people the second the whole thing went down, and I got them from all over. And honestly, my goal is when you listen to me, you're never really sure where I sit because quite frankly, I never fit into any of the categories normally. And so that's intentional. And that's actually just truly how I feel. I'm not trying to be vague about anything. But my phone blew up about this and it was like, have you seen this? And again, I got perspectives from all sides of this. And so I thought, I could share my opinions or react to this, but instead I'm just going to watch it and try and watch it through the lens of what can all of us, regardless of whose side you're on or which person you thought was in the wrong and who was in the right and whatever, and what can we all step back and go, how could we, because we can't control what those two did. And honestly, there's more going on than we probably any of us really know. So we can't control that, but we all can go, okay, we saw this and it definitely incited a lot of people's emotions. And whenever that happens, I'm a firm believer your emotions are an indicator light. And so when your emotions trigger off, you do need to look at it and go, what is so triggering about this? And what can I learn about it? Because the only person I can change is myself. And so that's how I want to focus on it. I'm not going to comment on how I felt about Trump or how I felt about Zelensky or who I thought was in the wrong or what Mike Pence should have done, because I don't think that's helpful. So I just want to share my observations and some leadership lessons that I took that can be universally applied. I specifically honed them in on things that I would say these things to every single person, including the reporters in that press briefing. and say, hey, can we maybe stop and think about this? So, one of the things that really jumped out to me was the number of statements that were made at people that assumed intent, that had some sort of like, I'm saying this about you because I am drawing a conclusion that I have made about who you are as a person. And I watched everybody in there, reporters, people on either side. I watched the way it just inflames people, because no matter how much you think you know about somebody, there's always more going on than what you see on the surface. And so when you say things to somebody and you say, this is you and why you're doing, or what this is what you're doing, it automatically, and I saw it from everybody, it automatically, and even just the comments and the feedback and the articles being written, it just incites this defensiveness and this outrage where we go, it's not that. And it's like, well, maybe there's truth in it, but it's never quite right. And so I think if you're a leader, a husband, a wife, whatever you are, be so careful when you're talking to people, especially in charge situations. Be careful about making statements about why somebody's doing something, or that you know that this is what's going on, because chances are you don't. Actually, you don't. You may know parts of it, you may know some of it, but you never have all the details, because people are wildly complicated. And it actually prevents, watching the whole thing felt like chaos, because I was like, can everybody just slow down and stop inciting this with each other? And so that was one that jumped to mind of like, hey, whoa, like, so walk away from this and go ask yourself, how often when I get into conflict, am I responsible for saying something about someone or saying something about what they did, and I'm just making a claim about them without really asking a clarifying question, which was my second thing walking away from it. I just kept going, can somebody just ask a question? Like if somebody says something and it really upsets you, rather than just react or respond to it, can you just go, hey, what did you mean by that? I'm feeling like you're trying to say that. Is that really what you're trying to say? Like, give people a chance to talk. And believe me, if you're sitting here going, oh, I know, Christopher, you're talking about that. I'm not, because I saw this from everybody. So don't think in any way, shape, or form I'm pointing my fingers at any one person or in the back of my mind. And I'm talking to myself just as much. Because honestly, as I watched this whole thing, I went, I've been Trump. I've been Zelensky. I've been Pence. I've been the reporters. I've been the reporter that wrote the clickbait article. I've been all of those people. And I'm going, geez Louise, it's this toxic combination. And I know that word is triggering for people, but I saw this toxic combination of hidden and unspoken expectations, statements being made about somebody's intention, often fueled by these hidden expectations or unspoken expectations, and nobody ever slowing down and going, can I ask more questions about this? And I'm not even going to give examples, because I know the second I give examples, people are going to go, see, you are on this side. And honestly, I could give countless examples from all corners where I went, a kind, gentle, clarifying question, possibly assuming positive intent instead of making a statement of negative intentions, might have dramatically changed the course of that conversation. And I know it's easy to go, well, they started it. Well, somebody always starts it. And the person who starts it always thinks the other person starts it. And you can go in this endless cycle of who cares who really started it? What you can control is be the one to stop it. And that's the part that just made me want to scream when I was watching it, going, can someone just stop this? Can someone go, hang on a second. Let's reframe this right now. Let's talk about what is really going on here. Let me ask some clarifying questions. You just said this. Is this what you're saying right now? You're seeming to get really upset and defensive. Is this what you're trying to communicate? Did I step on some toes? Which goes to my next one, which was ego and hypocrisy was all over the place that just seemed to fuel so much of this. And again, I'm not saying, oh, this person did it and that person did. No, I saw it everywhere. People were part of what was fueling this was people were saying one thing that they literally contradicted in previous statements in that conversation. Or it's like, well, of course people are going to get mad when you accuse somebody of something that you just did. Naturally. And when your ego's too big to go, you know what, you're right. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. That didn't need to be said. I let my emotions get the best of me, and I didn't need to make a statement like that. That wasn't helpful to this discussion. Nobody was willing to do that. And I get why you're in front of all the whole world and there's all these things, and we're afraid if we admit mistakes or say, I screwed up there. I let my, like, our ego just destroys things. And it was painful to watch pride across the board in just full flare. And that's something we all can look at ourselves and go, I mean, like I said, I saw myself in every one of those chairs watching that going, yeah, that's been me. And it's usually fueled by my ego, my inability to admit, you know what, I screwed up, my inability to recognize that I'm asking things from other people that I myself have literally just done in what I'm doing. I have hidden expectations of people. I'm not slowing down and asking questions. I'm not seeking to understand. I'm just making statements at the other person. And ultimately, I just feel like the whole thing, we lost sight of the outcome. Like, I don't think anybody, including the third party they were talking about, Putin, I really don't know that anybody really goes, you know what I want? War. I want war, and I want to destroy each other. I want more death and spending more money we don't have on stuff that isn't accomplishing anything, and it seems to be going nowhere. That got lost because everybody was too busy trying to preserve their ego and point out what's wrong with the other person. And it was like, come on, like, what are we doing here? Aren't we trying to? And nobody was willing to step up and go, look, I'm sorry. I'm letting this get out of control. Let me step back. Let's reframe this. Let's discuss this. And I know you'd probably be sitting there just foaming at the mouth at what I'm saying right now. And I'm not saying, oh, if this person had just done it, it would have magically changed things. No, that's not it. But if everybody committed to the things I just talked about and said, yeah, all right, can we all just work together to maybe work to stay focused on outcomes we actually all agree on, lay down our own swords, seek to understand each other, be really careful the way we talk to one another, and, like, not have expectations that suddenly get brought up in a situation where it's like, whoa, like, why are you putting this on me? If we all did that, I honestly feel like things like we saw play out, it's not that they wouldn't happen, but they'd happen a lot less. And they de-escalate a lot faster. And instead of it blowing up all over the news and then sending the nation and the world into absolute chaos as people take sides and start firing rounds from the other side of the field, we'd be able to go, all right, you know what? Okay, you know what? If you can eat crow, I can eat crow too. And, I'm not going to see you eating crow as an opportunity to step on your neck. I'm going to see it as an opportunity to say, all right, okay, let me put my sword down. You can step on my neck for a minute. I deserve it too. And I think the challenge that I have, that I know probably if you take the time to let wipe the foam off your mouth and take a deep breath, I get that feels impossible. And one of the things that I think is really unfortunate, I don't hide where my worldview comes from, but we don't always have an agreed upon standard. And so, I recognize not everybody holds to the standard I do. And that's where we run into issues like this, because people go, well, I think it's fair to hit you back because you hit me first. And then the other person goes, well, fine. Then if you're going to hit me, then I'm going to hit you. And if we can align on the standard, even if it's not the same one, okay, like I said, maybe people wouldn't agree on my Christian worldview. Okay, that's fine. But would anybody really actively disagree with the things I just said? Like, would anybody really say, no, I actually think beating the crap out of people to protect your own ego, even when it causes absolute destruction, that's a good thing? Really? So I don't know. Like I said, to me, as I watched the whole thing, I watched it honestly heartbroken and went, here we go again. Here we go again. And there's so many things that could have been done differently all around that would have resulted in a different outcome. And while I can't control that, I wanted to make time to come on here and say, let's all learn from this. And I'm not asking you to side with everybody and dismiss or overlook what the people did. Yeah, there was some really crappy behavior. There was some really inappropriate stuff. I am not happy, but I think everybody needs to apologize to everybody and go, wow, that was embarrassing. That was not my best moment. Everybody needs to do that and go, can we start over? And I can only imagine what would happen if everybody did that. Honestly, if everybody did that, I can only begin to imagine the kind of healing that could create. Okay, I'll stop there. I want to transition over to Microsoft's Mariana. The pronouncing it, honestly, don't try and pronounce it by its spelling. You will be way off every time. Because last week I talked about, Google Willow, and it supposedly shut down its program, and there was some strange things happening in the noise. And I know I got the messages from people going, this is clickbait. You're just making things up. Where's your sources? I'm like, I linked them in the comments, but it's fine. Go ahead. Shoot from the shoot from the sidelines. So this is going to be more of a technical one because I truly walked away last week after seeing the announcement from Microsoft going, what is going on? And why is this such a big deal? Now, I'm not going to talk about Amazon's because they came out with one too. I really want to focus on Microsoft because I'm actually, after doing more research into it, I was actually really, really fascinated with what Microsoft did and the approach they took and why it's such an interesting step into the quantum sphere. I will do my best not to try and keep it simple and not get super technical. But if you have questions or things like that, send them to me afterwards and I'll try and clarify or give additional details. But I now am even more intrigued by where Microsoft is. Not so much on the, oh my gosh, is this, what does this mean for things? But what Microsoft pulled off is a very interesting and yet controversial step in the quantum space, in that they actually, so while everybody else was in such a hurry to do quantum computing, which like so many people are, they're just in a hurry to do it. They kind of are like, we'll clean up the mess later. And if you don't know much about quantum computing, that's okay. But if you've ever seen videos of it, there's like this really cool, like steampunk chandelier thing that goes along with it. And you're like, ooh, what is it? And it's hard to understand, like, what is that chip and how does it fit into there? And it has to do with the instability of the quantum sphere and the fact that when you start dealing with quantum mechanics and particles that are potentially in infinite states all at the same time, it's extremely unstable. And so you have to go to great lengths to try to stabilize the environment to prevent anything from disrupting it. And that's one of the major problems with quantum computing is under traditional, the traditional way of doing it, which I think is superconducting qubits. Okay. And you can go back and look at what the definition of qubits is, but essentially it's a particle that's instead of being in the 1 or 0 state, it's in infinite states all at once. And typically the way many of the chips have gone is this superconducting qubit. They're creating superconducting qubits. It's a different manner by which doing it, but it's extremely vulnerable because these qubits are sitting along a line, and even the slightest disruption in a particle, a magnetic field, anything can just throw it off, which is why there's so much noise when it comes to things, and why when you try and scale quantum computing, it's very difficult because you have to have so many of these things working because so many of them are getting disrupted and messed up all over the place that you got to now do this across millions of qubits to hopefully get one that's successful. So you can see it scales very poorly when it comes to some of this stuff. And so that's why you've got this steampunk thing, because it's trying to keep it down to as close to absolute zero as it is, so that molecules are literally almost not moving. They suck all the air out of it, so it's a vacuum. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. If you're not a tech nerd, I won't keep geeking out on it because you might be going, I don't even know what you're saying and I don't understand, whatever. But it really is fascinating to see the lengths they have to go to with this. So I was curious because Google had successfully done this, and Google and Microsoft aren't the only two in the space. There's others, IBM, and there's other big players doing it. But many of them have been taking this different approach. And Microsoft has been working on this for 17 years to really focus on this whole idea of the Majorana particle, which in essence is less vulnerable, and that one of the risks is with typical quantum particles, qubits, there's a positive and a negative charge. And as a result, it's very vulnerable. Okay. It's very vulnerable, which causes a lot of these errors. And the Majorana particle has been a theoretical thing where it was like, what if we could create a particle that actually was stretched out across, and I know I'm going to butcher this. So if you're a technical person, you're probably going to be like, Christopher, that's not exactly how it works. Like, yes, I know, but it stretches it out and spaces it out in a different way so that it's actually, you can punch a hole in it and it doesn't blow the whole thing up. So the one example that people have used a lot is, if you tie a knot in a rope, you don't disrupt the knot no matter what you do to the rope, so long as you don't mess with the knot. And essentially what the Majorana particle does is spreads this thing out so that you have less of a chance of cutting the knot itself. Versus the other ones, the knots are like right there, and all it takes is something to hit that knot and boom, it blows up the whole thing. So Microsoft, rather than just saying, how do we force quantum computing and then we'll clean up the noise later, said, let's actually figure out a better way to do quantum computing. And let's take the time to find a more stable way of approaching quantum computing. And that's really where the Majorana particle came into play. Now, granted, this thing isn't new. I don't have my notes up right now, but like it was theorized, I don't remember where it was, like a long time ago, but they haven't really been able to prove it. And that's where when Microsoft came out and said, we did it, like we actually successfully created this stable Majorana particle that's operating it's creating a quantum qubit. It actually doesn't have all the noise that it has. Now, if I remember right now, it's only 8 of these particles operating off the current chip. But they wanted to perfect this way of actually doing quantum processing, because then instead of having to scale, okay, well, if we do it with 1,000, we actually need 10 billion of these quantum particles because there's so much noise. We need 10 billion to get 100 that are accurate. If we get the Majorana particle right, we can say, well, I mean, if we have 8 and really 8 or 7 of them actually remain stable through the whole process, through the whole compute, we don't need to scale up to 10 billion of them because it scales better. And so that's where this is a pretty significant development. Now, if you read stuff, you'll see people get really upset about it. They're like, that's not exactly, we still aren't sure that it's working the way they're saying it is. But it's actually, and the technical term is, it's a topological qubit. So it's a different way that it works on the, what's the term I'm thinking of? The superconductors. Anyway, I don't want to get too technical for the sake of losing all of you. If you want to know more, let me know, or there's plenty of other resources from folks who probably are far more eloquent at explaining this stuff. But essentially, it's a far more stable way of doing quantum computing. And so now what this does is potentially, right, they still got to prove it more, and they're still taking all the heat from everybody, and everybody's like, how is this actually going to do what you said it's going to do? But it seems as though they've actually made a major breakthrough, which actually this would be the first one, to my knowledge, that I could find that actually has taken this approach to quantum computing. So it still allows it to do the quantum computing in a much more stable way, still requires a lot of the cool steampunk stuff to make it happen, but it is far less unstable, which means it's easier to scale. You have less noise, you have less room for error. It really makes quantum computing much more feasible, assuming this all goes according to plan. And on top of it, then what's really exciting about this is by doing this, we're actually going to be able to see this as moving out of the theoretical scientific world, because right now we're still very much in the scientific world of this. How do we do qubits, and do we do topological? Do we do superconducting? Do we do trapped ion? Which one's the best? And right now it's looking like the topological, this Majorana particle, is much more stable, much a better way of doing it. If that proves to be the case, we're going to start to see the quantum computing space take off significantly, because I was watching one interviewer who was talking with the Microsoft engineers on this. And if this really truly is what they're saying it is, the real advantage to this is that this now becomes an engineering challenge versus a scientific one. So now it becomes a matter of, okay, now how do we scale this? How do we make it more feasible to actually, make this more accessible to people? How do we democratize the capability? All this other stuff. And so this could be really exciting. And that's where, to me, when I looked at it at first, I'm like, okay, somebody else is kicking around, another quantum device. It's not as groundbreaking as I thought. Then when I started digging into it and seeing the way they approached it, which doesn't surprise me with Microsoft, that's the approach that they would take, it could change things. Now, a lot of people are like, so what? I mean, what is this actually going to do for anything? Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk at length about all the possibilities of what quantum computing could do, because there's plenty of other people doing it. And honestly, it's way still too early to tell. While I say if this in theory is accurate, it does move quantum computing into a new sphere that makes it an engineering challenge rather than a scientific challenge to solve. We've still got a long ways to actually, scale, bring this into a sphere that people can actually use, apply it in different ways. But one of the primary ones that I think we're going to start to see this start to move very quickly is in chemistry. And largely because of the fact that trying to understand molecules and particles and how they interact with each other and chemical reactions and all this stuff is very, very, very complicated. It's very difficult. It requires a ton of computing power to calculate and model the sometimes seemingly infinite possibilities for all the different factors that can come into play just as a simple example, if I were to say, what are all the possibilities of drinking this Spindrift in my body? And it's like, I don't know, like what medications are you on? Like, what's your body composition? What time of day did you drink? You start thinking about these things and trying to isolate what happens when I consume that becomes an infinitely difficult problem to solve. Now, if you think about companies trying to manufacture and create new particles or new products or things like that, and they're trying to figure out how could we possibly know the implications of this thing. It's a computing problem. Well, if we can get quantum computing up and running, it suddenly becomes a lot easier to start to do some of the analytics and research into, okay, what do these compounds do? And when we mix them together, what happens with this? And here's all these other variables. Now model this out so that we can hopefully see further into the future and predict what might go wrong with this, what might go sideways, what things might we need to consider, so that instead of waiting until it happens and we go, oh crap, we put asbestos in everybody's house. Who would have thought? We can go, all right, if we do this, this is going to happen. You know what? We just need to cancel the whole thing, or we need to find a different way, or we need to create a different compound to be able to pull this off. So right now, that's where a lot of people are looking to what they're going to be able to do with quantum computing. There's countless other use cases, but I just wanted to kind of, again, highlight the significance of Microsoft's quantum chip, break it down a little bit more. Like I said, the biggest thing to note is it's a far more stable way of creating qubits, which means less noise, less risk, easier to scale, all this other stuff, and ultimately transitions it into an engineering problem, in theory. To the critics out there who are going to send me messages and tell me, no, Mike, I saw yeah, I know. I'm not saying this is the end of things for all the competition. I'm just saying it's an impressive breakthrough, to say the least. Okay, so let's move on to number 3, which was a thing I came across the other day that I actually thought was really fascinating. And of course, it came across as a clickbait headline of, the biggest AI Black Swan event is about to hit the world and disrupt everything we ever knew about computing. And in the thumbnail or something like that, there was this little, I don't know, I've got like a Mac Mini. It's smaller than that. It looks like a little USB hard drive. Honestly, the picture of it looked about like this. right? Like just a little charge pack. And it said, this has all the power of an Amazon data center right here. And I saw it and I went, what is this? Because this was what it was proclaiming the Black Swan event was that this new advancement that they have discovered is going to radically change the way we do digital processing, digital computing. And so I looked into it. I did some more research on what exactly it is, and what they're really talking about, and how are they making such a proclamation about, what this is. So I'm just going to share with you a little bit about what it is, the real world implications of it, because I think it is extremely disruptive. And I actually think we're already seeing indications that there is truth behind this and people are figuring it out. But it's not going to be quite the Black Swan event that I think many might think. Now, if you know, I'm not going to explain what a Black Swan event, but let me just say it's extremely disruptive to an industry, like completely blindsides and changes the entire course of something. And nobody saw it coming. So essentially what the claim behind this is that when you think about computing, there is the I/O, or the data transfer, and then there's the computing, the processing. And as you look at a lot of like SaaS, software as a solution, I think that's right, or PaaS, platforms as a solution, you see these massive data centers. And so what's happening is there's a lot of time wasted from when you need it to do something, and then the time it takes to transmit that data, and then the processor itself like completes it. And then there's a lot of travel time in between. I mean, that's really the essence of it. The I/O CPU difference, the breakdown is just not there. And so there's a lot of waste in the processing power, because the computer, largely, the CPU is just sitting there going, waiting for the next instruction, waiting for the next instruction. And then it finally gets one, and boom, in the blink of an eye, at the speed of light, it does its calculation, it does its computation, and then it says, here you go, here's order fulfilled. And then it's got to travel back. And then it's sitting there, twiddling its thumbs, waiting for the next thing. And then the next thing comes through and boom, it does this. And so in theory, the theory goes that if you could somehow better anticipate what is going to need to be processed before it needed to be processed, or, close that gap, you could, in theory, close the gap and get exponential compute power out of the technology we have today, without having to build massive data centers, without having to consume massive amounts of electricity, all this stuff. Now, a good example of this, all right, just a good example of this is if you think about how Apple and its iPhone has really worked to put, in a lot of devices now, are looking to put AI-capable chips on the device. A large part of that is to try and address this same issue, so that rather than, you putting in a prompt into ChatGPT and it having to send this stuff out and then wait for, its queue and then get processed and then get shot back, you can just go, well, let's do it on device. And we cut that travel time down significantly, which improves performance, all this stuff. And so in theory, and what this company that, has these claims, and I looked into some of their stuff, and it seems like they've actually really done some good stuff. They've shown that they actually can do this, which again, we can sit and argue if this is possible or not. I've looked into the arguments against it. I get it. You're kind of saying well, how do we eliminate all inefficiency out of the system? But the reality is there is tons, 90% of the work of a traditional computer is waste. It's just literally moving data from memory and storage, taking it out of memory, taking it out of storage, moving it around. That's where 90% of the effort goes, only 10%. And so that I/O bottleneck is huge. And so look around, you see what we're doing to try and close that bottleneck. And traditionally, the way we've done it is to, you build bigger and bigger and more powerful data centers. You build heavier resources, more power hungry tools that do all this stuff, instead of saying, what if we just built a more efficient machine? What if we took that 90% to 50%? What kind of gains could we get out of our existing hardware today that would actually, or how much more efficiently could we run with all this stuff. And this is the black swan event, is that they've cracked this. There are people now that have cracked this and have completely eliminated. And that's where I kind of roll my eyes and go, you've eliminated the inefficiency. I don't think you've eliminated the efficiency, but you might have greatly reduced it. And so if that's really the case, if we've removed this redundancy, if we've removed this inefficiency, this could be a major breakthrough. Now, the reason they're claiming this means that, oh, we aren't going to have any data centers is they're saying you're not going to need them. You're not going to need a data center, because rather than working with a PaaS or a SaaS and, working with Amazon to host all your stuff, you won't need it. You're just going to have a tiny little box sitting in a room somewhere that, does everything. Now, to the people who go, that's ridiculous. I mean, if you think about computers, there was a time when computers were the size of gymnasiums to do very basic computations. And now we have devices on our wrists that are infinitely more powerful than that. So to say that's never going to happen, I think is foolish, in the sense that it's like, well, no, I mean, I think we're going to be able to become more efficient, which is going to be great because we need to. If you followed me for long, I talk a lot about the fact that the inefficiency and the drain on the system and the power and the environmental implications of the stuff we're doing is terrible. Absolutely terrible. So this could be a massive innovative breakthrough. What I don't like about it, though, is this claim that it's like, this is the end of data centers. However, if you watch the news, there are a lot of these big companies that are scaling back big time their data center stuff. If at the end of 2024, everybody was like, there's going to be a data center everywhere. We're going to have these things built all over. And all of a sudden now people aren't building data centers. All of a sudden now, well, we're holding on this. We're not going to have that anymore. And I think it's largely due to this efficiency that we're seeing here, that the big industry, the big players are picking up on and going, hey, before we spend billions of dollars building massive data centers that are going to be extremely expensive to maintain, extremely expensive to staff, let's maybe check into this first. So I think there are some legitimate indications that this isn't just a red herring, if you will. And so I'm interested to see how this progresses. Where I don't think it's going to be quite what they are saying is data centers and all of this stuff aren't only in place because of inefficiency. Companies have always had their on-prem, things. And yes, the cloud dramatically changed that because they couldn't scale. And so you had to go to these big players to have massive data centers that you could just pull from because it was more stable. So is there a world where, similar to iPhones having AI chips on them to do more of the AI processing right on device instead of having to do everything through a data center, could a change like this encourage that? Yes. Do I think some of these big plans, so if you're investing tons of stock in data center, construction, or you're building a company in data center manufacturing, you might want to reconsider your plans, because I think this is going to put a serious dent in where everybody thought this was going. But I don't think it eliminates it. The claim, oh, we're never going to have a data center. Once we do this, there's just going to be computers on everybody's desks. The problem is silos are super inefficient. And a large part of the reason companies moved to the cloud was because there was so much benefit from the scalability and, all this other stuff. So is it possible that the big players might say, we can cut down on our stuff? Yeah, I think so. But the demand is just going to grow. I mean, just think about back when computers first came out, people were like, oh, the only people who are going to need this is NASA and big government. Like, come on, really? Like, that's not how it works. We just continue to expand with the demand. So if this works, might it change the way we go about it? Yes. Is it going to probably significantly disrupt some of the things that everybody was saying were for sure going to happen in 2025? Yeah. Does this solve potentially some of the major inefficiency problems that we have with computing as we know it today, where we go, oh no, like our technology, we've got is like, as an example, is quantum computing the only way we're going to be able to achieve the kind of horsepower we need to do the work we do? Maybe not. If we clean up this IO CPU problem and go from 90% efficiency to, 5% inefficiency, that's infinitely more computation power than we could have ever imagined. So might that be enough to solve some of these problems? Might it make things way better without having to have a steampunk chandelier in your dining room to be able to run things? Yeah. And if you look at the trajectory of technology, that's a very natural progression. So that's the big black swan event. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. It's definitely not one I had considered. I really hadn't. And actually, as I dug into it, I really had not considered and thought about how inefficient our processing and data transfer is right now. And I went, oh, that's actually really smart. So in some ways, this company that's talking about this did exactly what Microsoft did and said, instead of just looking at building more powerful processors, bigger data centers, all these other things, maybe we just try and squeeze more out of the same thing, which is brilliant, and can have some massive implications on things. Now, when this will come to market, I guess we'll see what happens. Okay, there's your technical sandwich. All right, there's the protein and the meat and the cheese of the sandwich. Hopefully, the first one at least lets you know I'm not going to, send you off the rails and kick in your amygdala response. But I want to come back to another very controversial political thing, but again, approaching it from a different angle. So one of the other things that happened in the last week that, even I had a reaction to initially was, if you haven't seen the video that was posted on Truth Social by Trump about, Gaza being turned into a resort, it was basically like an AI generated ad promo, which, by the way, if you watch the thing, it's a pretty crappy one. I'm like, this is like a hack job of an AI video, but that's not the point. The point is, it's this kind of weird, almost commercial for what they're going to do to Gaza. And it's this, hedonistic landscape of, it's going to be parties and resorts and yachts and, nirvana, if you will. And so I watched it because, again, I got all the messages and everybody's like, Christopher, what do you think about this? And oh my gosh, did you see this? And I saw it and I went, okay, I'm having a reaction to this here. So I want to respond to it a couple ways. So the first one is specific to a bit that John Christ, he's a comedian, if you don't know who he is, he always does. He says, what them Christians doing? And I actually I always laugh whenever I hear him do it, just being part of Christian culture and all this stuff and seeing some of just the stupid stuff we do. Because I was watching a lot of the people in that part of my community, because I've got a really diverse community, but, obviously there's big chunks of it that are part of the Christian community. And it was entertaining, I guess, to watch people absolutely freak out about, the biblical connections to this video. And in this video, there's a very brief scene where there's a big gold statue of Trump in the middle of Gaza. And of course, this fires everybody up. And if you don't know much about the Bible, it's entertaining to say the least. You can go look it up. But, there's all these comments of this is just like Nebuchadnezzar when he builds the big golden statue. This is a fulfillment of Revelation in rebuilding. The Antichrist is going to do this and it's going to be in Israel and they're going to rebuild the temple and desecrate it and all these other things. And I was just watching I can't remember his name from, It's Always Sunny in Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And he's got the red lines and the map and he's, and a lot of that was going on. And I was like, this is not helpful at all. I mean, at this point, if you are anybody and you still firmly believe that Trump holds to biblical principles and priorities, I honestly don't know what to say to you. Like if you're somebody who really is still defending him as, the paramount example of bringing Christianity to America, which first of all, I don't see that as the solution to any of our problems. But if you still are on that train and the thought of people saying this is terrible, what he's saying is wrong, like, I really don't know what to tell you. It's very clear. I mean, the video itself, put the golden statue aside. There's nothing biblical about anything in this video whatsoever. I mean, you can't look at it and go, yeah, that's what Eden looks like. Like, I mean, come on. It's not at any, I mean, this was like Vegas squared. Okay. So that was one of the things where I'm like, really? Like you're going to freak out about this and it's causing inroad fighting amongst each other. But I don't think it's the right thing to focus on. I mean, for those of you who hold to a Christian worldview, it's not our job to sit here and try and figure out who's the Antichrist and is this really him? And is this going to be the year the temple's going to be rebuilt and all this other stuff? If it is, we'll know when the time comes. And we're not doing anybody any favors. And we're making ourselves look ridiculous when we're sitting here going, this is the fulfillment of Jeremiah, yada, yada, yada. And this is what we see in Revelation 6. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know how long people have been doing this? Just don't. And to those of you who don't hold to my worldview, if you watch some of this stuff and go, are you guys serious right now? This is what you're doing. I feel the same way about it. Okay. And so if you are, please don't. It's not helpful. It just causes division and it makes us look silly. But so that aside, okay, instead of just the what them Christians doing, because there's a lot of that right now. All right. But then there's the other side of it, which I don't really care what your worldview is. I don't really care whether you're pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. I mean, I do. Don't take that as I don't care. Like, do whatever you want. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, regardless of where you're sitting, whatever aisle you're sitting on, I don't think anybody should look at that and go, this is awesome. We're going to take the absolute destruction and ruin of a people group and an entire part of a country that has just been utterly destroyed. I mean, I've watched drone footage of Gaza and it just breaks my heart seeing what's been done, not only just to the land and to the buildings, but to the people and how they've been treated and what they've had to go through. And quite frankly, anybody whose heart doesn't break over that, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, if that just doesn't make you feel sick and sad and feel like this is just wrong, this is not okay, I don't know what to say. And so then to see a video of that as like, hey, well, that's all over and look what we're going to do instead. And to not just be disgusted by that and go, and that's not an anti-Trump. That's not Republicans are horrible. That's not, I'm just saying, like, I don't care who it was. I don't care who would say that or do that. I would still say that is not okay. That is not okay. That is an absolute exploitation of a horrific and tragic situation. And that should bother anybody. And if it doesn't, like, look in the mirror and go, do you really not care about people that much? That after what these people have been through, that's what we do with it. We're going to celebrate with a resort where we're going to have singing and dancing and sitting on the beach and getting drunk and going to casinos. Like, that's our response to what's happened. To me, it's just disgusting. It's honestly disgusting. And like I said, that's not a political statement. That's not in anything. And I think if anything, it should encourage all of us. And by the way, to the folks who I know might just want to punch me and go, yeah, but what about what they did to Israel? I'm not in any way downplaying what Hamas did to Israel. I'm not saying what they did was fine. I'm saying hitting each other back, going back to my point about the earlier thing in the Oval Office. If we just keep swinging at each other, all we're left with is what we see in Gaza right now. If we just keep swinging at each other, exchanging blows, going, well, last one standing wins. It's like nobody wins. Nobody wins. Everybody loses in the end. Everybody's beaten, battered, bruised, bloody. And even the winner is a loser. So I think just to me, as I watched this, I just went, oh, why? Now, as a response to that, as I sat on that for a little bit, because part of me, was like, how do I feel about it? And of course, because I am so familiar with scripture, there was, of course, a part of me that was Charlie for a moment in Always Sunny going, oh my gosh. But I got over that pretty quick. And then I just sat and thought about, and what I can't tell, and why I think we just need to be really careful of this kind of stuff, because I see a lot of this, and this could be applied to the Oval Office situation too. I see a lot of these things blowing up that completely distract all of us. And what I can't tell is this really just an intentional distraction? Like, is there something bigger going on that we should be paying attention to that we're not, because we're distracted by an AI video of something that rightfully upsets us? I understand why it upsets us, but like, is anybody actually thinking this is going to happen? Is this actually something anybody's working towards? Is this just a outrage mechanism to try and get everybody mad at each other? Like, I don't know, but I think it's something we all need to step back and go, all right, like, how do we respond to this? And I've had a number of conversations with people over this week just talking about it. And there's people who are upset about it. There's people who are excited about it, who, like I said, I've said, what's to be excited about with that? Why would that be a positive thing in any way, shape, or form? And how is that not insensitive type of a thing? And so I think, I just caution people with this stuff, because it's exhausting. It's mentally, it's physically, it's emotionally, it's spiritually exhausting to get sucked into these things and to just be outraged and upset and fly off the rails over this. And like I said, whether it's an intentional, we're just trying to keep you from paying attention to the billions of dollars that we're pouring into AI warfare and, this other stuff that we're doing that we hope nobody asks any questions about. Or if it's just truly pride at its best, going, yeah, I only care about what's good for me. I don't know. But I think when we get sucked into it, what we don't realize is it's actually robbing us from being able to make the most of the human experiences that we have and be the best version of ourselves with the people who are in our sphere, because we're so busy getting upset and outraged about these things that we really have zero control over. And if you see some of this stuff and you go, there is something I can do, I feel compelled to help with aid, or gosh, pack up my stuff and move and go do something good, then do something with it. But if it's just going to make you mad to post nasty stuff on the internet and rip each other apart, just don't. And if it's taking your mental and emotional energy, I just even think about some of the stuff that I just have to kind of put on a shelf and go, I've got 8 kids and a wife that need me. And I can't be obsessed with what might happen and where we might be going and what this whole thing might be. And because it's actually robbing me from the life that I have and the sphere that I actually am experiencing right now. And I would just encourage all of you to go through that same exercise. So hopefully me saying that didn't leave you foaming at the mouth too much. Hopefully it helped bring some clarity and hopefully calmed you down. But if it didn't, you can send me your angry messages. I don't mind. And usually I'll just ask a question of, what are you really angry about? What are you really upset about? Because emotions are an indicator light and they tell us something's going on, but they make a terrible lighthouse. And when we use our emotions as a lighthouse, they'll send you into the jagged reefs and they will sink your ships real quick. So be careful with that. Once again, I hope you found this helpful. Hope you found it encouraging. I hope it helps you navigate things as you step forward. And I hope you have a great Friday and a great rest of your weekend. And we will see you on the other side.